Here we have the dash cam itself, which as you can see is very small and compact, chosen basically for its compactness and the fact that it can be mounted very easily behind the rear view mirror. The problem being, of course, that mounting it behind the rear view mirror means that normally the power cable, which plugs into the side of the device here, will then dangle down the middle of the windscreen, which, if nothing else, is a bit distracting. So we're going to try to avoid that. Here's the first step in making this installation. This is the internals of an old TomTom power supply. Once you take the casing off, you're left with the circuit board, a standard USB socket, and a side connector, the spring-loaded bit at the top, which goes to the negative, and the coil spring shown at the bottom, which pushes the center pin of the connector into the positive connector of a cigarette lighter. Once denuded in this form, you can graft on some cables to the circuit board. They're soldered in place here at the end, and these can then be connected to your power supply, 12 volts, for the next. And a few minutes work with a piece of heat shrink and a hot air stripper gun, and we have a protected version of the power supply. And the next part of the exercise is actually trying to insinuate that into the tiny space above the dome light. And now we're going to find the power source for this and the positioning for the little power supply. So we take off the little alien eyes covers and we get an appropriately sized Torx. In this case, I'd like it to have been a screwdriver. I don't happen to have one that's the right size, so I'll just use this key. I'll put the screws in a sensible place so I don't lose them down the side of the seat. Not sure you can see that terribly well, but they are quite easy to get to once you've pulled that off. You do need to do this with at least the roof latch released. That then comes down there and we will see inside here the connector which carries the power to the courtesy light. Now that also has rather neatly a positive that goes off with the courtesy light power, and that halts after a fixed amount of time when the ignition switches out and the car is locked. I do not know what this thing here is, but I suspect it's for something I don't have. Doesn't matter, it's this white connector here that's the important one. And to release this plug, you need a tiny screwdriver to go into the hole there, because there's a smallish latch that then releases the thing, which I can't do one-handed. I do apologise. Now, as you can see, the plastic housing here is really quite flexible, which is handy in this case because it does mean I can pull the cable from the courtesy light out where I can really get to it, and any additional connector I put on there will easily go in under there. So reassembly will be not too much of a problem once I've got a connector to take power off these little cables here. And here's how it's wired. Just a basic chock strip, and the connector is still in place. Only the outer two wires are connected, brown and brown with a black tracer, the latter being 12 volts connected to the timed circuit on the courtesy light. So that will go off when you lock the car. This is important to note because obviously if you want this to also operate in parking mode, you need to have a permanent live to it, but then you have to remember to turn the camera on and off when required. And here, tucked neatly out of the way, is the power supply here, wrapped in a little bit of foam and some gaffer tape to stop it from rattling. Give it a quick run over with a test to see that it still powers the camera, hasn't been broken by my fiddling around, and then the cover will go back on. And there we have it, a USB power cable tucked neatly out of the way behind the mirror, nothing trailing across the dash, which at least leaves me with the option of using the lighter connection to power my phone. And finally, here is the camera in place. Not a lot to see in cabling, and I could probably tuck most of that out of the way if I wanted to.